Vish. So this should be a lot of fun. I'm going to dive right in because we have limited time today. So we're going to spoil the entire show and tell you who A is right from the start. So A is me. My name is Alethe. I am a Black Badge recipient from DEF CON for winning the DEF CON 27 Social Engineering Capture the Flag competition. I won't dive into what that is because you all know if you're here. I won the contest in SE Village, this most recent in-person DEF CON, so I am the reigning champion. And I also hold a silver and black badge at Trace Labs doing their OSINT CTFs, which are a lot of fun, and I highly encourage you to check those out. I am the Vice President of Dragonfly Security and also a founding member of the DEF CON group DC 209, among other things. So today our agenda is pretty packed. We're going to talk about the anatomy of a pretext, pretext points of failure, the goal of a pretext, and creating a pretext. Very briefly, you should have attended Kirsch's OSINT training yesterday for all the details on that. We're going to talk about the 6 universal principles of influence, avoiding objections, and then tips for how to actually perform vishing calls. We're also going to talk about how to get flags and 3 very useful techniques for how to do that. And then we're going to wrap up with ways that you can defend against these types of attacks. So really short disclaimer, don't do bad things, don't break the law, and you won't get in trouble. So all of what I'm about to cover today is not legal advice. You should definitely consult the laws and any legal impact in your region or location. We are doing this all safely within the confines of a contest, which has been approved as an ethical contest. So I would not use any of these tactics outside of this unless they are for the purposes of good. First, we're going to talk about pretexts. So what is a pretext? A pretext is a purpose or motive alleged or an appearance assumed in order to cloak the real intention or state of affairs. So essentially it is a mask. And this disguise is your outward display that you are showing whomever you're engaging with to make them believe that you are someone that you're not, or that you have access that you don't, or that you're creating this character or this veil around yourself to give you a way to either trick the person into doing something or gain access to a place that you shouldn't, or something like that. So basically, the breakdown here is it's that you're weaving a story about who you are to present to whoever you're engaging with, so that they feel that they can trust you and they can tell you things that maybe they shouldn't. So in my book, a pretext is something that you are, something you do, and something that you have, the have being the OSINT that you gained during the course of your investigation and the reconnaissance that you did yesterday. All towards the goal of gaining the thing that you need. And that is at its very base how a pretext breaks out. It's somebody that you're pretending to be who does a certain job or is a certain type of person within an organization, or who should have access to the thing that you need. And then using the information that you have to substantiate that pretext and make people believe that you are in fact that person. So we're going to talk really briefly about pretext points of failure. How do pretexts go wrong and what causes good lies to fall apart? If you are not prepared, if you do not have the confidence that you need to carry off the pretext, if you seem like you're very unsure of yourself, if you're anxious, and I am naturally an anxious person, so that's something that you need to learn how to overcome. And you want to use pretexts that kind of fall into your natural demeanor and your natural personality if you can. so that it's easier to carry those off. You're going to notice that in TV shows, sometimes an actor pops up as roughly the same kind of person. Like maybe they're always a lawyer, or they're always the scumbag bad guy, or they're always, you know, the damsel in distress, or the best friend, or that kind of role. And it's called being typecast. And usually that happens when an actor's strengths really play to a certain type of character. So you'll find that for me, for example, I tend to lean heavily into the empathetic pretext because it's a lot easier for me to ask for help and have my emotional state and my tone and the way that I'm behaving line up really well with somebody who's in distress. Rather than being somebody who can really carry off an authority-based pretext, like, for example, Chris Kirsch, his winning call, and I highly encourage you to watch that reenactment on YouTube if you haven't already. His winning call was very authority-based in the sense that he was pretending to be somebody from IT who was asking a user within the company to do something, and he had the authority to do that. And if they'd had any technical objections or anything like that, he was ready and prepared to overcome those objectives. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So you want to use the knowledge that you have just broadly in your experience as a person on Earth. You also want to prepare and do all the reconnaissance that you can and find every element of information that you can about your target company, their culture, jargon, things that you can use within your pretext to help ground it in reality for the person that you're talking to. And you want to keep it simple. I know that we all have a tendency to over explain things when we're lying, like the time that you broke something in the house when you were a kid and your parents called you out on it and you had like a 25-minute explanation about how it wasn't your fault. This is not something you want to do. In the pretext world, it's always better to simplify. You can think that adding things like accents or props, background noises, all of that stuff will help you. But for some individuals, that's really going to just complicate things. And it's going to give the person you're talking to a lot of avenues to come up with objections and to question you. So the less details you give, the better. So for example, if I was going to call and speak to somebody about replacing their computer at work, I wouldn't even give them a last name. I would just be like, hi, this is Bethany. I'm calling from the headquarters. I've been tasked with contacting this list of people. And do you have a minute to talk to me today? And that is extremely simple. And because it's so simple, it's not likely to raise any red flags for the person that you're talking to. So it's really good to just kind of pare everything down to the most essential details, and don't give any irrelevant facts, details, explanations. Don't talk too much, and try to keep it so that it all seems very normal and run of the mill.
We have a question, Alethe.
Sure, go ahead.
Being that you're naturally anxious, how do you learn to lean into it? Somehow make it a strength.
So yes, this is a process. It seems like for me, it's helped doing, excuse me, public speaking has helped. So if you can join like a debate club, or you can start participating in things like Toastmasters, just kind of putting yourself out there. And it's kind of like the more uncomfortable conversations you can put yourself in, and you know, call your wireless provider and argue with them about your bill. just try to put yourself into situations where you have to demonstrate your ability to argue your case, but also talk to more people. And if you have a way to get, like, say, a part-time job in customer service or sales or something like that, that can be really, really beneficial. In a past life, I had a job as a wireless cell phone salesperson, and that was extremely helpful because you have to talk to a wide variety of people and demonstrate the usefulness of your products and convince them to buy them. So that's another way that you can kind of work on that anxious twitchiness that you might have just in social situations, because I am socially awkward. So yes, it's definitely a learning process. You just have to keep at it and try to get comfortable where you would normally be uncomfortable. So the goal of a pretext, your subconscious is continuously scanning your environment, and the only time that your subconscious will actually notify your conscious and be like, hey, we've got a problem, I need help, I need an adult, is when your subconscious determines that there's a threat. So we want to avoid the target's subconscious going, whoa, wait a second, this seems like something's off. So we want to be as harmless as possible. And a good pretext is our veil to disguise our objective and obscure this threat or risk from the target's subconscious brain. And the best way to describe this is when you're driving in a car, you have traffic all around you, your subconscious is actually scanning your environment continuously, but it only seems like you notice the car that's too close to your rear end when it's too close, right? And that's because your subconscious is like, whoa, this thing's too close. Hey, I need help. Can you look at this? And then your conscious brain gets tapped in and you've got to decide how you're going to handle the situation. So that's the shift that you'll see if your target, especially over the phone, is like, wait a second, where'd you say you were calling from? Or you said that we're getting reports of trouble on the network. Who's reporting that? Those types of things are questions that are going to arise if you're not doing a great job at veiling that threat. So you want to make sure that you put together a really cohesive pretext and that you are able to disguise the actual reason for you asking the questions that you're asking. So creating a pretext really is going to come from the OSINT data that you found previous to you making your pretext. So I would highly encourage you to do all of your reconnaissance first. And then that intelligence that you gain from the reconnaissance is going to inform the pretext that you create. It's really difficult to be like, this is my idea. I'm going to be this, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this, and that's how I'm going to get this flag. If you then go and try to perform your OSINT to support that pretext, it's going to be a lot more difficult than just doing the investigation first, and then from the knowledge that you gain, try to figure out how you can piece together a pretext using that data. All right, so influence. Influence is incredibly important, and it is just essential to you being successful in vishing. And what I am talking about is, at its core, building rapport and building trust and confidence with your target to gain influence over them and their decision making. And there are some core principles that are universal to all people that will help you to do that. The first of which is similarity. In my book, personal experience, people like people that are like them. And so if somebody likes you, it's like the first thing you learn in sales training, they are more likely to engage with you and do what you ask them to do, or buy your product, or tell you all the things. So you want to find some commonality with the person. And Whitney is somebody who I think of first when I think of this, because when she competed at DEF CON, the first thing that she did on the phone call was say that she either had the same name or that somebody in her immediate family had the same name as the person she was targeting. Hi, Todd. That's so crazy. My husband's name is Todd. And now immediately there's this immediate relationship or connection between the two of you. Even though the person has never met Whitney, they feel connected to her and that they can trust her because her husband's name is Todd and Todd is my name, and now we are friends. So that's a really good way to do that. Another good way to do that is just by mirroring some of the things that the target does, how they talk, what they say. Now listen, these things can totally backfire if you do them too intensely. So make sure that it's subtle. For example, if you were standing face to face with somebody and they cross their arms and you cross your arms, and then they scratch the side of their head and you do the same thing, they're going to start to get freaked out because their subconscious is going to go, wait a second, what's going on here? So you want to try to do those things subtly if you're mirroring or if you're going after commonalities too hard. And one of the ways that that same name game can backfire on you is I had a sales representative once who said that his mother's name was Alethe, and there's no effing way. So yeah, it can definitely backfire. So make sure that your the things that you're saying, try to keep them genuine. Like if you like cats and you genuinely like cats and they like cats, they're going to believe that you like cats a lot more if you can genuinely express excitement over that. So try to keep it something that you are genuinely connecting with them on, if possible. Authority will, you can try to position yourself in an authoritative platform to give instruction. This is a little bit difficult, so I would use this sparingly. I wouldn't say, I'm your boss, you need to do this type of a situation, but you can kind of position yourself within or outside of the organization as someone who has power over this specific situation. For example, the IT person from the internal IT department calling a user, they have the authority to make these requests. I'm not saying that I'm your manager. I'm just saying that in this specific example, I'm the authority or the expert on this topic. That's what we're talking about. So consensus is, it's social proof. So this is where you'll notice on websites, there's always testimonials, quotes from people who've also bought the product. All of these things let the person who's viewing the website know that other people have done this and they've liked it. So if everybody who's done this has liked it, then you would probably like it too, and you're more likely to then go buy that product, for example. Consistency. If a human being has made a choice, then they are more likely to make the same choice or remain consistent with that first choice and not go against it. So if you can get somebody to say, commit to buying big ticket item, and then you ask them if they'd like to add on an accessory that is beneficial for that big ticket item, you may be able to leverage their consistency and the need to be consistent to gain that item because they've already bought the big thing. And I'm using a lot of sales stuff here, but it's very relatable on all of these topics. So scarcity is a perfect example. You're much more likely to buy the last one of something, especially if somebody else wants it. So if somebody else wants an item and it's the last one in the store, now the perceived value of that item has just skyrocketed. But if you walk in the store and there's 20 of them, then that item is not as valuable in your mind because there's a bunch of them. I could always get another one. It's not a big deal. And then finally, reciprocity. This is quid pro quo, or the need to reciprocate if somebody gives you a gift or gives you anything. And I'm not only talking about, hey, I'm going to give you a gift card, so you need to give me all the things I'm asking you for. But I'm also talking about, hi, my name is Amanda. And now they feel like they're obligated to reply to me and tell me their name. That's a good example of reciprocity, even though it's not physically giving or even information giving in the way that we think of flags. You can definitely use that reciprocity in every point of your conversation to try to get them to either give you the same information back from their side or correct a thing that you think is wrong and that you want them to give you the correct information instead. So we want to avoid objections. And what I mean by objections is when the target challenges you or any element of your pretext. So for example, if they say, you're calling from what department? Who did you say you're with? Why would you need that information? Why were you asking me this? Those types of things are objections, and being able to overcome those and move on in the conversation is essential to you being successful. So that's something that I would practice ad nauseum, is how to overcome those various objections. And the way that you can do that is learning how to be quicker on your toes. And I know that a lot of social engineers recommend things like improv to do that. I just argue with my children. So you can find some happy medium between that to give yourself a way that you can overcome those objections and think quickly on your toes and try to convince them that everything is okay. These are not the droids you're looking for. So we're going to move on to vishing and some tips about how to be successful in the context of a vishing call. Jason Street gave me a wonderful piece of advice before the first time I competed, and I was a ball of nerves and complete and total wreck, just because I was so anxious. And he just said, just get in the booth and lie. Like, why are you overthinking this? So keep it simple. Limit the irrelevant details like we discussed. State your objectives clearly. You want to make this as simple for the target as possible. Why are you calling me? What do you want? How do I get you off the phone? And then leverage your natural character and your abilities to your advantage within the context of your pretext, and use awkward silences to your benefit. This is a huge asset, and most people don't realize how beneficial silence is for us in the context of vishing or phishing. When somebody is uncomfortable or they're in a conversation, especially over the phone, they feel like there always has to be somebody talking. And so you can use this to your advantage and ask a question and then just sit back, or imply a question and then just be quiet, because somebody is going to feel the need to fill that air. And if it's not you, it's likely going to be the other person. So for example, you can just be like, hey, I need this. And they're like, well, but blah, blah, blah. And sometimes if you just remain quiet, then they'll elaborate. And then you can either get the piece of information that you want, or they'll give you other pieces of information. Use this intelligently through the course of your conversation, because if you just sit there silently, sometimes it can get weird. But you can leverage it to try to get a little bit more from the person rather than you jumping immediately back in and filling in a bunch of details. Let them fill in the details. If you do get a target that is just not cooperative, or they're giving you, challenge after challenge after challenge and objecting to all of everything that you're trying to accomplish, then I would absolutely recommend that you don't argue with that person. If you have the ability to switch targets, or if they're just being belligerent and they don't want to cooperate, switch targets. Just end the call. I mean, nicely, don't just hang up on them. If you've got the time, just be like, I'm sorry to bother you, and hang it up. Move on to the next person. Don't argue, because the natural inclination of any person is that when you're challenged, you feel like you have to go on the offensive or the defensive, or somehow argue with the person that you're talking to. And this is going to lead you down the road to disaster. And what I mean by that is, I've watched many vishing calls take a really terrible turn when the person who is being targeted issues a very minor challenge, like, who'd you say you were? And the social engineer then goes, I'm so-and-so from blah, blah, blah. And the attitude on that is then just going to escalate the objections and the challenges that you get from the person that you are targeting. So you want to make sure that you're conscious of your tone, and that you are either neutral, or at least you don't come off kind of like a jerk. So just be very conscious of the way that you are conveying the message that you're giving to the target, and try to limit your emotional reactions to these people's objections, because that can completely destroy your entire call. The dream call is that you call, you say what you want, you say who you are, they immediately believe you, and they give you all the things. Sometimes that just doesn't work out. There was a vishing call at DEF CON last time that the SECTF happened, where the gentleman had one pretext. He had one name that he was using within his pretext, and he made the first call, and the first woman was not cooperative at all. And she immediately notified the rest of the office, hey, there's this weird guy calling. He says his name is this. He's calling about that. Don't answer his questions. So then in the span of seconds, the next call was placed, and the person who answered the phone started just berating the social engineer with questions. and finally said, "You're a GD liar," when he tried to push his point. So you have to also be conscious of trying to fly under that radar and not tipping off your target, because when you are doing an assessment like you're doing today, where you're dealing with business employees of a business, they can communicate. And this is one of the reasons why I targeted the regional sales managers who were all remote employees who worked independently at their various locations, because I figured, you know, if one of them does discover that something's gone wrong, then it's going to be a lot harder for them to communicate that to the rest of the organization before I can finish my 20 minutes of calls. So that's another thing to consider, is how you ground yourself and how you respond to those challenges can impact the rest of your call that you have with the target. Trying to leave us plenty of time for questions. So if I'm speeding through too quickly, don't hesitate to throw questions in there.
So we do have a question.
Okay.
And you may have addressed this, but I want to, you know, sort of focus on it again, is
Sure.
how do you handle those objection questions?
You really have to be good at thinking on your toes. And this is where preparation is going to be everything. So if they ask you a question, you are prepared to answer it with the knowledge that you already have about their company. So if they're like, who's authorized this? You can be like, well, so-and-so, who's, you know, the manager of blah, blah, blah. If you don't do your due diligence and find out who the, you know, the decision makers within the company are, who's in charge of each level, who would be this person's boss that I'm talking to right now, all those things are going to only help you to use your improv skills to be quick on your toes and come up with an answer. Another example of a vishing call that I witnessed at DEF CON was a woman who tried to replicate Chris Kirsch's final call strategy identically. She did it exactly the way he did it, by script and with the same reasoning and pretext elements. But because she wasn't prepared to answer the target's questions and think on her toes, and she didn't have the full breadth of knowledge about the target organization, as soon as this person started to question her, she started to crumble and fall apart. And it was hard to watch. And I really felt for her. It's kind of like if you've never snowboarded before and you watch somebody fall on snowboarding on TV, that you're like, oh, that's too bad. But if you've snowboarded and you fall and then you watch somebody fall on TV, it's like, oh, that hurt, because you empathize and you can feel their pain. That was exactly what the situation was like. And we were just like, cut the call, you know, stop the call, go on to somebody else. It's not worth your time to sit there and argue. If you have the time to sit there and you really only can get the piece of information from that one person, then I would absolutely encourage you to try to do some improv training, or just practice. And then other than that, if you can cut the call and move on to the next person, if they're just stonewalling you constantly, just do that. In the engagement side of things, if I'm just having a bad day, or I'm just not in the right mood, or I just can't get into my character, then I'll delay making calls until the next day. And I know a few social engineers who do the same thing. So if you're just having a bad one, like, call it quits, go back, do some more research, and then you can come back and tackle it again. All right, so we're going to talk about how to get flags and the powers of persuasion and compliance applied to some of the flags that you've had in your list yesterday and today. So quid pro quo, this is the idea of reciprocity, and it's very simply demonstrated in the how do I get the receptionist's name? Well, I can call the receptionist and just say my name and see if they offer their name, and that would be a good way to demonstrate reciprocity in a way that's not like a material gift giving situation. And if you pause long enough, they'll likely say, you know, hi, how can I help you? Or my name is such and such. And then at that point, you know, don't give up. If they're just like, how can I help you? Then during the course of the conversation, if you're able to endear yourself to them a little bit, you could probably say, what was your name again? And even if they hadn't given it to you previously, they'd likely give it to you now because you're asking directly. But you can always try these subtle tactics first. So for the food service company, you could say something like, hey, our cafeteria is run by so-and-so, and who does yours? Because ours isn't run very well, and I think that I'd like to look at another option or something like that. But if you just say, who does yours, and then let them respond, don't throw all the extra details in there. You can explain later after they give you that information. So then moving on to the operating system, sometimes in the course of the conversation, you can work in some like side conversations where you are, you're able to kind of pepper your actual tactic or your script. And I wouldn't script these things out like to the T. You've got to be able to be dynamically in the conversation and respond to it with the responses that you get. But if you're able to do like a minor like side conversation within the context of what you're doing, then you can actually work in something like, oh, this computer is just so slow. I'm on Windows 10 and I can't get anything done. What are you using? Ugh, I miss my Mac, or something like that. And sometimes they will then offer you the information, or at least tell you that you know, they like or don't like what you have, and then sometimes tell you what you are looking for. Sorry, I have a message. I had to get a child away from the door. Okay, so next up, we're talking about being helpful, and the way that you can kind of use this to your advantage, double stack your odds of being in your favor, is that you can target people whose job it is to help, because people are naturally inclined to help and be helpful. So the flag examples that we're going to look at right now are going to a website, for example. So if, and I demonstrated this in the SECTF with the first phone call that I made, and it was to the internal help desk at the target organization. So I called posing to be a person who needed help at the target company. And I just said I wasn't able to load a web page on the network, and I wanted to know if the support person could help me and load the web page themselves on their computer. And it took me a little while, but within a few minutes, I was able to just be desperate and gain empathy from this person and ask them to go to the website. And I was like, I'm having so much trouble. I'm not sure if the site is blocked on our network, and I really appreciate your help. And then I just kind of sat back and waited for them to solve my problem, rather than just continuing to talk and flood them with information that was irrelevant to the situation. And because it's the, you know, IT support person's job to help, they feel like they're obligated to at least try. And I was able to go around all of their typical processes for doing troubleshooting in this instance by just continuing to offer that as the solution. Can you just check it for me real quick? It'll take 2 seconds. And just kind of giving them the artificial time constraint. Like, you do this and you check the website and make sure it's good. And then, you know, you'll get me off the phone and you don't even have to open a ticket. And then moving on to garbage service company. It would be fairly easy to call a company and just be like, hey, we moved into a building down the street. I haven't been able to get out and meet you guys yet, but we're trying to set up all of our utilities, and I was wondering who does the garbage service for here. And you can just use their natural inclination to be helpful to their neighbor to give you the information about who does the garbage pickup. Finally, social proof. This is something that can be leveraged pretty easily within the course of a conversation with a target company employee, because you've already got this this tribe of employees. Like all of these people work for the same company, and it's assumed that they can trust each other. So the way that you can leverage that natural trust of their fellow employee is to then apply it to the social proof principle of influence and say that somebody else has already complied with your request. And if that person did it, then the other person is more likely to do it as well, because this is in line with the proof that this is socially acceptable within their work environment. So do you use MFA? The way that you can find this out is saying, hey, I just talked to so-and-so employee. They told me that they do use it. Are you? And then you can get them to understand, Todd already told you, so it's probably safe if they tell you. And then again, we can use this for going to the website as the flag to go to a specific website. You know, we're asking everybody to take a look at this website. Everyone on your team has already done it. Everyone within your office has already done it. Everyone in your group has already done it. You're the last person on my list. Do you have a couple minutes to go ahead and you know, go to this website? Just check for me if you can see it. And most people would comply because they feel that social proof, everyone in my company has already done this, so it must be fine. And then B, I'm the last person that's holding this up for being complete, so I should probably get on it and get that done. And all this stuff sounds really you know, benign. The conversations are not scary. There's no threats. There's no you know, fear-based content that would elicit an emotional response. And really the reason why I try to attack these situations with very run-of-the-mill everyday conversations, as opposed to just going, you know, I'm calling and the CEO said you have to tell me this, is because people aren't looking for these types of tactics to be used to gain information from them. They're looking for the Nigerian princes and the ransom kidnappers and the Social Security number administration scams. Those are the things people are aware of, and that they are, you know, that they filed away in their subconscious to alert them to a problem. So you're actually going to get a lot farther if you stick to just casual conversations where, you know, you ended on a very nice note. The person feels better for having met you. You'll learn more about that with Chris Hadnaghi. But you don't make them feel like they are they're at risk. And they might just hang up the phone and go, you know, that was a weird conversation, and move on with their day. So how do we defend against these types of pretexts where the individual is you know, not really aware that there's a problem, because nothing is pinging the red flags that they all know from all the Facebook posts that their mom shares. The way that you can identify these more sneaky custom pretexts with the casual and benign conversations is ultimately to trust but verify. So don't blindly believe everything that the person on the other end of the phone tells you. You want to go through proper channels. If you're like, you're calling from my insurance company, and yeah, it said that, you know, my insurance company's caller ID showed up on the phone, they could absolutely be spoofing that number. And it's always best to just, hey, I'm not comfortable giving you any information over the phone like this. I'm going to go ahead and hang up, and I'll call back to the number on the website, and then that person can help me on my account. That's always the best way. Because a lot of companies won't reach out to you for any of these things, let alone ask you to verify things like passwords or private or sensitive information. I fell victim to one of these types of scams really early on in my experience as an adult. But it was early in the morning. I had just got my coffee and I got a phone call. They spoofed my wireless phone provider customer care line, and they said, hey, you are an amazing customer, and we've decided that we're going to apply a credit to your bill. We just need you to confirm the account with the 4-digit PIN on your account. And I was like, okay. And I gave them the number, and I hung up the phone, and I was like, that was strange. And so I immediately called the wireless company back, even though I really did fall for it. And I would have been at risk. I still called them back, and I said, hey, this just happened. Was it you? And they said no, and we would never call for anything like that. And then I was able to change the PIN. So we really want to make sure that even if, and everybody is vulnerable to these types of attacks, even if you do fall for it, at least understand how to mitigate the risks or eliminate the consequences after the fact. But asking questions is pivotal. Just one or two questions can completely destroy a pretext. For example, the people that call saying that you have a virus on your computer and they need remote access. If you say something to the effect of, well, I don't have a Windows computer, or which computer did you mean? Or how do you know? If you start asking questions, they're going to see that you're not as soft of a target as somebody else, and they'll likely move on. So challenge their reasons. If they're just being difficult to deal with and they can't substantiate what they're doing as genuinely a thing that they are charged with, just hang up. And if you call back to the company that they're pretending to be and it was a legitimate person, then it's really a no harm, no foul kind of a situation, because most people understand that these attacks are real and they're going to be sympathetic to your suspicions. And then the last part is, if you feel that you are having a very emotional response and there's, a desperate situation that has to get solved right now, and you're very emotional and anxious and all that kind of stuff is bubbling up to the surface, then I would say just remember, stop, drop, and roll. And most of us learned that in school with regards to fire safety. But in the context of social engineering, I use it to say, like, stop, drop the phone, put down the mouse, just stop what you're doing, take stock of what is actually happening. Why are you feeling emotional? What is eliciting this response from you? Are they putting like super short time pressure on you to solve a problem? Or are they threatening somebody in your family? Or, all these various types of techniques that people are using to engage you on an emotional level. Oh gosh, if you don't click this link right now, you won't get this gift card. Those types of things. Stop, put down the mouse so that you can't interact with whatever it is, or just, hold the phone away from your head and take stock, and then roll around everything that they've just said in your head and try to think, is this popping any red flags on the list of things that could be a social engineering attack? Is it, have they tried to build trust with me and credibility? Are they leveraging authority against me? Are they trying to get me to do something within a very short time constraint or time period? Are they trying to get an emotional reaction out of me? And then just evaluate your risk and then determine what you're going to do from the point of logic and reason. That's the best way to defend against these types of attacks, is to stop, take a beat, and critically analyze what is happening and how that's affecting you, and whether or not this is likely to be a threat, or if there's another way that you can verify that this person is who they say they are. And typically that's going to be disengaging the call or going to the company's website in the case of, say, an email, or giving their actual number for that company a call and just verifying that what you're seeing is in fact legitimate and genuine. Because I will tell you, there are definitely emails that I've received at work and I've gone, that's a fish, because it's come from HR and they're saying, hey, this is the new plan for the next year's 401k. And I'm like, I'm not clicking a Word doc attachment. And they're like, oh no, that's a legitimate email from our HR department. I'm like, why are we sending Word docs to people as an attachment instead of the body of the email? But anyway, it's beside the point. So yes, trust, but verify. And that will help you infinitely to try to mitigate the risks within social engineering attacks. So wrapping up for today, I'm going to throw it over to questions, but thank you all for joining me, and good luck in your engagement this afternoon if you're competing. But yeah, I'll go ahead and open it to questions.
So while we're waiting on questions to come in, I have a question for you, Alethe.
Sure.
Do you have a go-to approach and also a fallback plan, right? And is it consistent across all different situations?
I would say I don't have like a one pretext that I fall back on, because I really do try to use OSINT to come up with something that is specific to that industry and that would be more believable. So for example, if I was trying to go after a lending company, then I would use my experience in title insurance and escrow to speak like them and talk like them about things like lenders and beneficiaries and the deed of trust and that kind of stuff. But for like a fallback, as far as I generally use empathetic pretexts. And I have been in the corporate world for almost 2 decades. So it's easy for me to slip into corporate business talk and try to be like the idiot girl from this department that needs help with that or help with this. I like doing, I'm a vendor, I'm one of your vendors, I'm coming on site to do a training and I just have some questions about the on the day stuff. Is your IT department in-house? Can they help me set up my projector? Do you have security? Do I need to badge in? That kind of stuff. But the one that I used for the SECTF, which was really amazing and it worked so well, was I said that I was calling on behalf of the IT department because their computer hadn't connected to the VPN in a while and we're getting ready to update a lot of the hardware that's out in the field with our sales reps. And we wanted to make sure that the new computers that we ship them would have all the software on it already before we shipped it out. And this is an actual process that happens within a lot of companies. So it was pretty believable. And the incentive of getting a new computer worked very well to my advantage.
Nice. We have a question for you. What strategies work best with employees further up the power food chain? People that are generally more careful and skeptical.
I would dispute that. Most people higher up the food chain, so to speak, in the hierarchy of a company, they have a tendency to assume that by the time the call gets to them, it's legitimate because they only deal with the highest level decision making. Whereas people who are on the lower level, sometimes they can actually be more weary of like the day-to-day processes, and it's actually going to tip them off more frequently that what you're asking for is out of line because they do the same thing every day for the most part, and this is not typical. Whereas executives or managers and directors, their days all look a little bit different. But generally speaking, by the time a request gets to them, it's already gone through a number of levels. So if you're able to get straight to the upper decision-making management through their direct dial phone numbers that you found on the internet, by the time you get to their phone, they're going to think you already went through reception and this person and that person and this person had already authenticated your story and verified that you are who you say you are. And then they just assume that they can give you that stuff. And that really worked well for me when I was, and this is horrible, I was targeting the lead of charitable giving at my target company because that person's job is to help me, but she was at a director level within a giant Fortune 500 company. And because I was able to just dial direct to her desk and not go through reception and other people that could have objected to what I was doing, she just assumed that I was okay to talk to, especially because I said I was calling from one of the charities that they had previously worked with. And I wanted to recognize their previous participation. And I quoted the dollar amount from the press release that they had raised through the most recent campaign. And so she just blindly accepted that I was who I said I was. And that's the dream. But yeah, so upper level management, just make sure that you are confident in your pretext, that you can kind of emulate the same demeanor as an executive within a company. And it's not that much different than anybody else that works there, but there's a certain level of comfort that an executive has versus a hourly employee at the company. So just kind of try to behave like them. That would be my best advice.
Nice. Up next, we have, if you are able to open a shell, how do you typically get the info or data out?
That's a very broad question. And I am not, I don't think we have time to answer that today, but I would encourage you to reach out to me privately if you want to explore those things further.
Okay, we have one more. My VoIP provider advised me against DIDs. Is this attack vector one of the reasons for that advice? Does a menu system stave off this attack to some degree?
Yes, and I can tell you that as a voice over IP provider. I actually am part owner of a VoIP phone company called Penguin, and that is one thing that we absolutely recommend to our clients. A, it's cheaper because you don't have to pay for a bunch of DIDs on your phone system, but B, if you have extensions as opposed to direct dial phone numbers, that can help add an additional layer of complexity and eliminate things like robodialing and spam calls, especially if you have your phone system pick up the calls instead of a live receptionist. And there's all kinds of cool spam blocking that you can add now too that will block known spam numbers before they even hit the voice over IP system. So that way, I mean, if you have all that in place as an organization, you've got spam blocking, you've got an auto attendant that answers the calls, you have only extensions and no ability to bypass the phone system using the direct dial phone numbers, then you know, for the most part, if somebody's gotten all the way through to you, that they are probably legitimate, probably, but I would again say, you know, trust but verify. But yeah, direct dial phone numbers are dead. They're going away. As far as business and corporate America goes, they are dying, and it's for good reason.
All right, we are all done. So any closing thoughts or even advice for the competing teams and just the general audience? Elise, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I am thinking really hard. So I would say 100% rehearse your pretext, but be ready to be dynamic in the conversation to make it feel natural, because you might have to go off script to justify yourself. Try not to get too anxious or stressed out by, you know, challenges to your questions, and keep your emotional tone and your emotional level consistent throughout the conversation. But yes, be very comfortable with your pretext and any jargon or things that you're going to talk about, because if they object to those things, you need to be able to have a quick retort. And a good way to do that is to deflect. So for example, you can say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm just flustered today because I'm working from home with a sick child, and I apologize. Let me just double check that real quick. And you can kind of gain their sympathy for your difficult situation, but also make them dismiss the discomfort that they had when they challenged you. So yes, good luck to everyone. I'm really looking forward to listening in on all the calls later.
Awesome. All right.